The History of the British Empire. Part 5. Britain becomes a global empire. By the early 18th century, Great Britain had emerged as one of Europe's fastest-growing powers. The Union of England and Scotland had strengthened the kingdom economically, politically, and militarily, yet Britain still faced fierce competition from rival empires determined to dominate global trade. Its greatest rival was France. Across North America, the Caribbean, India, and the world's oceans, Britain and France competed for territory, trade routes, and influence. What began as commercial rivalry gradually developed into a global struggle that would determine which nation would dominate the 18th century. The first major test came during the War of the Austrian Succession. Although the conflict began over the question of who should inherit the Habsburg throne, fighting quickly spread far beyond Europe. British and French forces clashed in North America, India, and the Caribbean, proving that future wars would no longer be confined to a single continent. Neither side achieved a decisive victory. Instead, both powers prepared for an even greater confrontation. That confrontation arrived in 1756. Known today as the 7 Years' War, it has often been described as the first true global war. Battles were fought across Europe, North America, Africa, the Caribbean, India, and the Pacific. Never before had so many continents been connected by a single conflict. For Britain, control of the seas became the key to victory. The Royal Navy blockaded French ports, intercepted merchant convoys, and protected Britain's growing overseas trade. At the same time, British armies launched campaigns across multiple continents, forcing France to defend colonies separated by thousands of miles. One of the most decisive moments occurred in North America. British forces advanced toward the heavily fortified French city of Quebec. After months of preparation, they launched a daring assault that culminated in the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in 1759. Although both commanding generals lost their lives during the battle, Britain secured a decisive victory. The fall of Quebec effectively ended French control over Canada. Across the Atlantic, Britain also achieved remarkable success in the Caribbean. Several valuable sugar-producing islands were captured from France, increasing Britain's already enormous wealth from colonial agriculture and international trade. But perhaps the greatest transformation occurred in India. For years, the British East India Company had competed with the French East India Company for commercial influence. Local rulers often supported one European power against another, turning regional conflicts into international wars. British victories gradually shifted the balance. The East India Company expanded its influence far beyond simple trade, taking control of strategic cities, collecting taxes, and exercising increasing political authority over vast territories. What had once been a trading company was slowly becoming the ruler of millions of people. When the 7 Years' War finally ended in 1763, Britain emerged as the undisputed victor. The Treaty of Paris dramatically reshaped the world map. France surrendered Canada to Britain. Spanish Florida also came under British control. British influence in India continued to expand. No European empire had ever possessed such a vast network of overseas territories. Trade flourished as never before. Merchant ships crossed the Atlantic carrying manufactured goods. Others sailed around Africa toward India and Asia. British ports became busier every year, while London developed into the financial heart of international commerce. Many people now believe that Britain's future lay overseas rather than in Europe. Yet, success also created new problems. Maintaining colonies across several continents required enormous military spending. The British government had accumulated huge debts during the 7 Years' War and now faced the difficult question of how those costs should be paid. Many politicians argued that the American colonies, which had benefited from British protection during the war, should contribute more through taxation. New taxes were introduced on paper, glass, tea, and other imported goods. To officials in London, these measures seemed reasonable. To many colonists in North America, they represented something entirely different. They believed they were being taxed without having any representation in the British Parliament. The phrase, "no taxation without representation," quickly spread throughout the colonies. Protests became increasingly common. Merchants organized boycotts. Political meetings attracted thousands of people. Relations between Britain and its American colonies grew more hostile with each passing year. Few people realized that these growing tensions would soon ignite one of the most important revolutions in modern history. The empire had reached a new height of power, but it was also standing on the edge of its first great crisis. The next chapter would tell the story of rebellion, revolution, and the birth of a new nation that would forever change the British Empire. The history of the British Empire. Part 6, the American Revolution and a New Direction. By the early 1770s, the British Empire stood at the height of its power. Its colonies stretched across North America, the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. British merchant ships dominated international trade, while the Royal Navy controlled many of the world's most important sea routes. Following victory in the 7 Years' War, Britain had become the most powerful empire on Earth. Yet beneath this success, serious problems were beginning to emerge. The 7 Years' War had been enormously expensive. Although Britain had gained vast new territories, it had also accumulated a massive national debt. Members of Parliament believed the American colonies should help pay for the cost of defending them. To officials in London, this seemed perfectly reasonable. Thousands of British soldiers remained stationed in North America, protecting the colonies from potential foreign threats and maintaining order along the frontier. Since the colonies benefited from this protection, Parliament argued they should contribute through taxation. Many American colonists strongly disagreed. They believed only their own elected assemblies had the right to impose taxes upon them. Since the colonies had no representatives in the British Parliament, many argued that these taxes violated the rights of British citizens. A powerful slogan soon spread throughout the colonies: "No taxation without representation." The first major controversy came with the Stamp Act of 1765. The law required official stamps to be purchased for newspapers, legal documents, licenses, and many printed materials. Across the colonies, merchants organized boycotts against British goods, while angry crowds protested in the streets. Facing widespread resistance, Parliament eventually repealed the act. But the dispute was far from over. New taxes soon followed: glass, paint, paper, tea. Each new measure deepened colonial resentment and convinced many Americans that Britain intended to tighten its control over colonial affairs. The conflict reached a dramatic turning point in 1773. After Parliament granted special privileges to the East India Company, tea imported into America remained subject to taxation. Protesters in Boston viewed this as another attempt to force Parliament's authority upon the colonies. One winter evening, a group of colonists disguised themselves and boarded several British ships anchored in Boston Harbor. Working through the night, they threw hundreds of chests of tea into the icy water. The event became known as the Boston Tea Party. In London, the British government reacted with outrage. Parliament responded by introducing a series of punitive measures designed to restore order. Boston Harbor was closed until the destroyed tea had been repaid. Massachusetts lost much of its political independence, while additional British troops arrived to enforce royal authority. Rather than weakening resistance, these actions united many of the colonies. Delegates from across North America gathered to coordinate their response. For the first time, the colonies began acting together. Tension continued to rise throughout 1774 and early 1775. Neither side expected full-scale war, yet both prepared for the possibility. British commanders stockpiled weapons. Colonial militias trained more frequently. Local communities organized supplies and ammunition. Eventually, the crisis exploded. In April 1775, British troops marched toward Concord, intending to seize colonial military supplies. Along the way, they encountered armed militia near the town of Lexington. a shot was fired. To this day, nobody knows exactly who pulled the trigger. Within moments, fighting erupted. The American Revolutionary War had begun. During the early months of the conflict, many colonists still hoped for reconciliation with Britain. They wanted greater political rights rather than complete independence. That changed in 1776. Representatives from the colonies assembled in Philadelphia to debate their future. After months of discussion, they approved one of history's most influential political documents, the Declaration of Independence. It proclaimed that the 13 colonies were no longer part of the British Empire, but independent states with the right to govern themselves. For Britain, the rebellion had now become a war to preserve the empire. British forces captured several important cities, including New York, using the world's strongest navy to transport soldiers across the Atlantic. Initially, Britain appeared likely to win. Its army was highly trained, its navy dominated the oceans, its economy remained vastly larger than that of the colonies. But distance created enormous challenges. Every soldier, weapon, and supply shipment had to travel thousands of miles across the Atlantic. Communications with London could take months. Colonial forces, meanwhile, fought much closer to home. The Continental Army, led by General George Washington, often struggled with shortages of food, weapons, and clothing. Many soldiers lacked proper uniforms. Some marched barefoot during winter, yet they continued fighting. Their determination gradually convinced foreign governments that the rebellion might succeed. Everything changed after the American victory at Saratoga in 1777. The battle persuaded France to openly support the American cause. Soon, Spain and the Dutch Republic also entered the conflict against Britain. The war was no longer limited to North America. Once again, Britain found itself fighting across multiple continents. The Royal Navy now had to defend the Caribbean, India, Europe, and the Atlantic simultaneously. Resources became increasingly stretched. After years of exhausting warfare, Britain's position weakened. The decisive moment arrived in 1781. British General Charles Cornwallis established defensive positions at Yorktown, Virginia. American and French forces surrounded the town by land. Meanwhile, a powerful French fleet prevented British naval reinforcements from reaching the coast. Trapped and outnumbered, Cornwallis surrendered. Although fighting continued briefly elsewhere, Yorktown effectively ended Britain's chances of defeating the revolution. Peace negotiations soon began. The Treaty of Paris was signed in 1783. Britain formally recognized the independence of the United States of America. The 13 colonies that had once formed the heart of Britain's North American empire were gone. For many observers, the defeat appeared catastrophic. Britain had lost one of its richest colonial possessions. Some believed the empire itself might collapse. Yet Britain responded differently. Rather than abandoning overseas expansion, political leaders shifted their attention toward Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. Trade with India continued growing. Naval exploration accelerated. New colonies were established elsewhere. Ironically, the loss of America forced Britain to become even more global in its ambitions. Instead of focusing primarily on North America, the empire would increasingly look eastward. This new direction would eventually lead Britain toward Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and an even greater presence across the Indian Ocean. The American Revolution had changed the empire forever, but it had not destroyed it.